You are listening to an MLGA Network podcast.
Welcome to Thank You for Your Servers, a show which looks at the tech news of today, but from a libertarian perspective. Now here are your hosts, Thaddeus and Gary.
Thank you for logging on to Thank You for Your Servers. I'm Thaddeus Preston, aka Nick Way. Joining me once again, Gary Guthrie. What's up, brother?
Doing great here, trying to wrap up a 3-day weekend after a trip to San Diego and probably way too much sun.
Jealous.
Oh no,
Jealous.
I got really sunburnt this weekend. It wasn't fun, but no, I mean the trip was fun, but the sunburn was not. So,
well, we all have regrets after awesome long weekends, but it is what it is. I haven't been doing nearly as much sunning as you, but being that my melanin content's a little darker, I don't burn as easy. So that's always a positive.
That's good.
Anyway.
I'm jealous.
All right, enough. Yeah, I know. People love it. Yeah, I dig it as well. Anyway, now that we got our little banter out of the way, this is your weekly, semi-weekly, sort of weekly rant about the tech topics of the weeks from a Liberty perspective. This and other podcasts are brought to you by the Make Liberty Great Again network and family of podcasts. And so let's get into it. First things first, Stream Wars.
Sounds ominous.
Yeah, so basically, for those of us who are nerds, be it Marvel Cinematic Universe nerds or, Star Wars nerds or anything like that, in the last couple of weeks, Disney basically dropped the infinity gauntlet of all of its content that it's going to be wrapping up into what is going to be called Disney Plus. So what makes this super exciting, and which is definitely going to kick off these streaming wars, is it is a awesome bundle that brings together Disney's basically, I swear to God, infinity gauntlet worth of content like plays. That's Disney itself, that's Pixar, that's Marvel, that's Star Wars. Remember, they own 20th Century Foxes too, right, as well. And like ESPN and ABC, and I mean these are all Disney companies, and the exciting plethora of content, original content that is, from they're going to do a adaptation, or they're going to take from the Marvel Cinematic Universe a Hawkeye original program. They're going to do one for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is going to bring Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan together once again to play the Falcon and or Winter Soldier respectively. And that there's going to be one that's called Wanda and Vision. Basically, it's going to have Elizabeth Olsen, who played, of course, is she the Scarlet Witch? I think.
Don't ask me. You know what? I could ask my son. He's the big Marvel fan here, and I'll tell you. I guess
he's
already, if he catches wind of this, which he will, he's going to be geeking out over it big time, and I'll be paying the $12.99 a month, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. Because here, so not to bury the lead. So the service will kick off probably. Oh yeah, it says November 12th. It will cost, for now, $6.99 a month.
Oh, really?
So $7 a month. Yes, that's just Disney Plus. So, but if you bundle, which the thing I'm most excited about is if you bundle its family of services, i.e., you obviously are going to do Disney Plus. You're obviously going to get ESPN, because again that is also owned by Disney, and you're going to get Hulu, who has a stake in. Whose Disney has a stake in, so you can actually get those three packaged together for $13 a month.
Wow.
It's, so for lack of a better word, man, take my money.
Right.
But look, there's more. So on top of the fact that they've acquired like the complete Simpsons archive, which, I mean, I don't know why they need to acquire it. They own it now. That'll be available on the service as well. There will also be, a Lady and the Tramp like live action movie.
Yep.
There will be spinoffs that will include some characters from Rogue One are going to have a spinoff series. There's going to be the greatly anticipated live action Star Wars series, The Mandalorians. There will also be a Obi-Wan Kenobi like spinoff TV show that will bring back is it Ian McGregor?
Yes.
Reprising his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Tons of cartoons, tons of, they're bringing, I actually heard that they're bringing back like not Hannah Montana, but like the other, like Lizzie McGuire. I mean,
wow.
They lay down the smackdown. They are going to come to play when they launch in the fall.
If they could bring back Song of the South, you sign me up right now. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that and, DuckTales and
maybe
even some other things.
All the good stuff. Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's so like there's going to be, I guess, over time, like almost all the Disney classics are going to start showing up on this Disney Plus service. And I was like, holy cow, like that is a compelling that is compelling. It's going to definitely prompt me to rearrange my order of priority of services I pay for. And it's, because I can combine my Hulu now with this. I mean, they're joining HBO, Netflix, CBS, Showtime, Starz, HBO Max. I mean, and then, of course, AT&T, which we'll discuss here in a minute, who are all going all in on streaming.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a thermonuclear exchange. Adding to the more streaming services that will be showing up is Apple's streaming service will be showing up here in the November timeframe as well. It will launch for about $9.99. It will have its own plethora of original content and programming. I've heard less about them than, there's not, they announced a lot of hype. They're doing some stuff with Spielberg. They're doing some stuff with Oprah Winfrey. They're doing some sci-fi stuff. They're doing some documentary stuff. And they're just adding to, they're the set-top box player, right?
Right.
Because you're obviously going to get Disney Plus, Hulu, Disney Plus, and of course you already get Netflix and other things on these Apple TV set-top boxes, but they're adding an additional value proposition in the form of Apple TV Plus. Also set to debut in November, and that will again be $9.99. So everybody is getting into the game, but the people who are in the game currently and are going to find a way to screw it up is AT&T. So AT&T, as we know, acquired DirecTV about a couple years ago?
Yeah.
2-3 years ago? I don't remember. And so they've been for a while, because I think DirecTV before the acquisition had DirecTV Now, which was kind of an over-the-top service that didn't require you to actually have a satellite dish, but you could just, an over-the-top service for those who are uninitiated is basically you get it over the internet. And it's basically the same cable experience you would get with DirecTV or Comcast for some of us, or Charter or whatever, depending on what region of the country you live in. But you would just get that over the internet as opposed to over the wires. I mean, it's still coming over the same physical wires that your cable company uses or your phone company uses, but it would just be IP based. So they, of course, were kind of killing it with DirecTV Now. They got acquired. AT&T is now rebranding DirecTV Now, AT&T TV Now or something like that. And now they're basically making the streaming products, so these over-the-top products, almost as expensive as just if you were to just bundle your soon to have Disney Plus, let's say a YouTube TV and you can buy, and a Netflix. You combine those together, you will potentially still be paying less if you bundle those three services together than if you go with one of AT&T services, because they've raised the rates now. And so, the perfect summary from this from this Ars Technica article about why they're raising these prices, because basically it's gonna be up to $135 a month, which is essentially what most people were paying long before the streaming revolution happened and these services started to disaggregate. So that's why when I said like, hey, you can, basically bundle 3 or 4 services together and pay way less than $135 a month. And so they've done that to all of their kind of entertainment offerings. They just kind of bumped up the price. And they've introduced this really weird tiered pricing scheme, which is something that's very annoying even in the streaming services, because sometimes you can get like Sling TV, there's like 3 tiers, right? And depending on what tier you get a certain mix of channels. That's annoying. But again, it's still cheaper than still going with an incumbent service that's trying to be an over-the-top service, but is basically regressing back to its old ways. And the pull quote from the Ars Technica article, when we're dealing with AT&T, is basically, in summary, AT&T has taken many of the pricing annoyances the consumers hated about cable and satellite and just brought them to online streaming services. And it shows. They've lost nearly 1 million subscribers in Q2 of this year because this pricing model isn't going to work forever.
Yeah, you know what? One of the things that really always bugs me about these pricing, they show up at your door, they hand you the sheet with all their channels, and then they still focus on, I'm looking at the pricing ranges here, entertainment, choice, extra, ultimate, whatever. All they're saying is, this is how many channels you get. And it's like, I don't care what how many channels. Like, I want to know what channels I'm getting. And there's no easy way to compare them. Cox is still doing the same thing here, where it's like, okay, well, you're going to get this package plus this package. I'm like, well, it's very confusing, and it always has been to me. And I really, like you said, I hate it.
Hey, and no offense to most of our listeners and stuff like that. It's not a boom. It's Gary's not having a boomer moment. I mean, that's right. True. I mean, it is absolutely confusing.
It's totally confusing,
even for those of us that actually pay attention.
And you can't keep up with it because they'll change, quarterly.
The lineups and certain things will graduate to other tiers, will be demoted. And it gets very confusing for the end user because there's all these encumbered contracts and stuff like that. And like, well, there's a dispute between Stars and name a cable company. And so now Stars goes away, but I was paying for Stars. Why the hell is it not there anymore? And I think as this disaggregation has happened, a lot of the slow killing of the incumbent cable companies is the fact that these content creators are now spinning out their own streaming services, and because they're holding on to their content, and they're making it very, very hard for the cable companies to aggregate all the content together. That's why the price goes up. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the reason why content is so expensive is particularly when it comes to like AT&T, DirecTV, and stuff like that, Disney. Right, because it's all or nothing with Disney on these. This was an argument in the early 2000s about carriage fees, right? Like, most of what you are paying for monthly in your cable bundle are these carriage fees from these conglomerations of content providers. So you're paying, and Disney is the highest. It's the most expensive. It's in some, I've read in some estimates, it's 30% of your bill. It goes to Disney, and it's amalgamation of channels and content that it then sells back to these companies. So it's funny, they're squeezing big companies like Sony and Disney and CBS CBS, or CBS Viacom and stuff like that, are squeezing these cable providers, but at the same time they're launching, probably ironically enough, these streaming services that go over the top that honestly use a lot of the cable providers' infrastructure to do it. And you're just like, so, I mean, in the future, does that mean then that, like, maybe if Disney sees, or NBC Universal or CBS Viacom has its own over-the-top service where it's getting some revenue, that maybe it will probably try to bring down the carriage fee prices for the cable providers, and maybe then the cable providers can then compete a little better? I doubt it. I think they're going to squeeze both ends. Whereas like, yeah, we're testing the waters with the streaming service and stuff. And you know, and a lot of these guys do exclusive content that you're not going to get on cable. Like CBS CBS, I keep saying interactive, CBS Viacom with their CBS All Access. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 original TV shows that are on CBS that you cannot get if you have a cable subscription. That awful Star Trek, Discovery being one of them. And hopefully they don't screw up, Picard when it comes out here next year. But I mean, that's one of that, and of course the shows that CBS has. That's a lot of the reason why, like, we pay them. What is CBS All Access? I think it's like $5 a month. It's pretty cheap. And yeah, just to be like, I want that exclusive content and stuff like that. In the meanwhile, though, if you're back in the Stone Age, not even the Stone Age, right? Because you can get these over-the-top packages that still have these channels, but for the rest of the country that is still kind of relied on your AT&Ts, your Comcasts, your Charters, your again, depending, Time Warners. It depends on your region of the country. These people get squeezed more and more and more. I kind of feel like, are they subsidizing my ability to just, go over the top and like buy these services separately? I don't know. It's going to be a lot. All I know is entertainment is going to get a lot better, but it's going to be terribly fragmented and expensive. And I think we're starting to see the disaggregation of this whole paradigm, particularly on the cable subscription front.
Yeah.
Right. These bundles and these packages front. I think this is going to get ripped
apart.
Well,
you know what I'm really
together at some point.
I'm kind of seeing on my end, at least in my own family, we're focusing, we talk about the exclusive content and things like that, with Netflix coming out with their own series, Stranger Things, of course, being the giant one right now. But the current cost. Yeah, there's a lot of other ones. My wife's really into this new show called The OA. And what I'm seeing is there's a lot more focus at a human level or at a cultural level now on what that content is versus where you're getting the content, or what, because it used to be all about, I got HBO, I got Showtime, I got cinema. And now it's more like, okay, well, I want this content. It's more content focused more versus channel focused, if you will. Right. And when people know what the content is they want, you want the Marvel Comics universe or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you're going to go with Disney Plus, obviously, right? And
yeah, and then actually, I think if you want the DC universe, I think there's a DC universe streaming service actually.
So exists. For me, it's kind of it's going to get all fragmented and weird, but I kind of like it, actually, just from a standpoint of I know what I want. I know what I'm interested in. If you had a streaming service that all it did was do home improvement stuff, I would be all over that for $10 a month, but that's just me. I don't know that there's a real market for it, but I think we're seeing much more content focused versus channel focused approach, at least on the consumer side.
Yeah, and I think from a corporate side, though, that's going to be disheartening because of the, basically the disaggregation, right? They made their bones, particularly the cable companies, aggregating this stuff. Now that won't be the case, and because it is very content focused, right? Like to the point where now there's a lot of exclusives that you can't buy. Because I would typically a lot of shows from behind Showtime's paywall or HBO, I would just buy week to week if they allowed me to, but sometimes they don't allow they don't do that, right? You can't buy week to week. You have to get the whole service, you have to get the package or whatever. You got to get the whole service and stuff like that, and so that's another way of kind of locking people in and stuff. There's going to be 1,001 business models of doing this. Piracy is not that big of a deal anymore. People still do it, but like people actually who pirate have a nasty tendency to almost buy more content or ingest more content anyway, and I think they're kind of dealing with that love-hate relationship, kind of like MP3s. And not to get into, we don't want to, I guess, belabor this too much longer, right? Because this is a big topic, right? When you get into like what's happening, what's going to be happening, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to all this new content that's going to be created in the next 6 months. I mean, from, Netflix, CBS, All Access, has great stuff. I think this Disney Plus is going to be phenomenal. I mean, and it's just going to be a lot of great content that's going to waste a lot of our times. But yeah, it's going to get fragmented and very expensive for the foreseeable future, because inevitably people are going to want to consolidate all this crap, and
it'll be
we'll
interesting.
See. But I'm excited about Disney Plus. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. So yeah, man, moving on, man. So now we get to talk about AI, which is my favorite bugaboo subject, and the global AI race. This is more along the lines of now you're starting to see articles, and I think this was it last week or a couple of weeks ago, the Trump administration signed I guess, what is it? An executive order that says we're going to focus on AI.
Okay.
So, launching the American AI initiative. It doesn't allocate any funds. It doesn't do anything except like, hey, here's these overarching principles that we want to address when dealing with AI. And we'll get back to you in 6 months with more detail. So basically not a whole lot, right? And so what prompted me to do this was just kind of reading this article from TechCrunch, which we have in the show notes. Saying that, this initiative is actually a good first step, but, lamenting the fact that the government didn't allocate a whole lot of direction. And that gets my dander up, because it's just you don't need direction, right? There's a very vibrant AI research, industrial research, academic research environment and out there. You don't really need government direction. You mean you want to have a vision that is emanated down from on high, but the industry is moving on without it, right? It doesn't need an executive order that says we as a national priority we now focus on AI.
But here's the thing.
That's already happening.
Donald Trump needs something in place so that in a year or two, when some major breakthrough comes around, he can go, see, I told them to do this. I don't know. Maybe that's out of line, but
that's never been the case. The only thing the government has ever been guilty of, or at least successful in doing, is getting the hell out of the way. And I mean, that's from it's funny because there's all this revisionist history about the government invented the internet.
No, they didn't.
The government did not invent it. They funded research in it, which, yeah, it's possession 9/10 of the law, but then it didn't do anything with it for a decade until they created legislation that says, hey, you can do commercial stuff now, i.e. they got out of the way.
Right.
And then that allowed the internet to do what it did. I don't want government to step into AI per se and think it can dictate where research goes. And here's the deal. The government has funded this research for almost 50 years when it comes to artificial intelligence. There have been many podcasts I've listened to from many old school researchers who have lived through funding winters. They call these the AI winters, where the government gets very excited about something. They start throwing money at it and or initiatives and or direction at it, or because really mainly what this executive order does is it basically gives other elements of the federal government the justification to allocate more of their existing funds toward more AI-driven research. Mm-hmm. Right. The DoD is already spending money on this stuff. The National Institutes of Standards and Technology is already doing this. The CDC is already doing this. All you have to do is go to a government website that is calling for any government agency that's looking for RFPs or requests for proposals, and you will see a litany of proposals that they're willing to fund that that has a machine learning or AI component. It's kind of like the insidious relationship between climate science and research and government funding, where if that's the cause célèbre, if you want to get government funding, you put climate change and or global warming and or whatever you want to call it into your request for proposal, so you can get the research grant and dollars and other initiatives and stuff like that. The same thing happens in venture capital too. Right now, there is an AI machine learning boom But we've discussed the fact that like a lot of this is hype. Like if you dig down deep into the research,
right,
it's hype.
It's a way to get more money. It's a way to, like you said, cause celeb, right?
Yeah, it's the hotness right now. And a government AI initiative is nothing more. It's kind of like the BRAIN initiative that the Obama administration signed, right? I read an article about that about a month or so ago. It's just like they got a lot of money and they're really no closer to some of their goals, right? Which is like, well, that's true because like the government just can't say on high, like, by this decree, we allocate resources to find out how the brain
and
works. And we will have advances. Yes, and therefore shall have advancements,
we will
right?
Cure cancer. And
like like that stuff. Or we will cure AIDS, or we will in the meanwhile, the money is nice, but it's irrelevant to ultimately finding solutions to these problems. I always ask this question, particularly when there's a new technology, because I'm also a big, follower of quantum information sciences as well. Why does the government have to always try to build a Manhattan Project for X?
Yeah.
Because it's just because you did the Manhattan Project once, which one would argue was probably an incredible waste of resources, but the end result was a big bomb and we won the war. And so by virtue of the fact that like the government has an entity put its mind towards something which is really good at, and that's killing people efficiently. And they think that they can take that same methodology for developing a weapon to end a war and kill people with like, well, then we can do a Manhattan Project for X. No, that's not how that works, right? Same thing. Like we can do moonshots. Do you know how incredibly wasteful the space race was? I absolutely get that it was awesome to be, put some people on the moon, put the flag in the ground, USA, that was awesome. However, that was a tremendous waste of resources. And to objectively look at it, was it necessary? I mean, put my MAGA hat on, yeah, maybe, but my Liberty hat is just like, nah, it was, and my Austrian economic hat, it was like, nah, it was a complete waste of resources.
And you look back, who actually won by getting the men to the moon? I mean, did the Russians win because they ultimately said, okay, we're done. We'd rather use our resources
the space
elsewhere.
race, right, to suppress our people and build more weapons. So that's what they ended up doing. That's what the Russians ended up doing. And so, like, yeah, I'm not saying that there was no value. And I'm not saying that maybe if a government were to put billions of dollars behind some initiative that it won't come out of the other end with something. But I think
the one thing
we're learning now.
The space race did, again, from a culture, I tend to lean to a cultural perspective, is it did kind of homogenize the United States people and really gave everybody a common focus. Even though it was a complete waste, It really did bring everyone together and kind of said, okay,
but how do you tangibly, quantitatively measure how many people it inspired?
I don't know. I mean, viewership? I don't know. I mean, as soon as that started dying off, they stopped right? So...
Yeah. I mean, how many tech entrepreneurs and people like that have been inspired by the space race, right? You could maybe say, but that's just a statement that someone makes. Like, what got you into computer science? Oh, when I was growing up, I watched the Shuttle Discovery or whatever, and that made me want to. I mean, you can't measure that.
You can't. But I think more than anything,
I mean, no more than you can measure an Asimov novel making people want to develop AI.
It just kind of, I think it did what it needed to do, and maybe it was just a big distraction from the Cold War. Maybe it was something to give everybody something to feel good about. I don't know, but
I think actually you might be onto something there. All right, because at the end of the day, all these things, particularly even with the latest American AI initiative, are dual use technologies, right? AI will be a weapon in the future. The space was a battle space at the time, and the ability to rain nuclear holocaust and death on your enemies from space was probably one of the drivers.
Definitely one of the drivers.
As to why we
can put a man on a
you know,
we can put a
race.
man on the moon. We can put a missile in your backyard. I mean, that was part of the message. I mean, let's be clear, right? I mean,
that was always Star Wars was the same way, right? Like the whole SDI, you know. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But the fact is, there's already industrial might behind AI, both in academia. Like I always used to hear people lament the fact that we don't have great research labs like Bell Labs and Skunk Works and stuff like that. Well, that's a lie.
Right.
Particularly in AI, I can point to 3 that are doing this. 4, right? Microsoft Research, DeepMind, Google Brain, OpenAI, the Allen Institute, MIT from an academics point of view, Stanford. All these, you know, Facebook has AI, IBM has AI, a division. You know, everyone is doing this research. There's a venture capital boom right now that we discussed in the last episode, where people are simply out of whole cloth, just like, hey, I have a pitch deck. It's just some new piece of software as a service that we're offering that uses machine learning and AI, right? When it really isn't. It's just using statistical methods in machine learning, but there's money flowing into it. That's the point. And there are other governments wasting money on this too. There's tons of, within the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, and other, you know, 3-letter agencies, there's tons of research dollars going toward doing this in-house and doing it outside and partnering with universities and defense contractors. To think that there's no money needed, to think that there's more money needed for this initiative from on high is silly. The only thing I can say about this American AI initiative is, all right, well, at least we're focused on it, because it is the battle space of the future. I mean, that's become quite obvious. And so, yeah, it's, you know, I lament about it. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think there's also in the show notes a kind of a link to from the CIFAR, a Canadian organization that kind of breaks down what everybody's spending globally. What country initiatives are being spent globally. I mean, the Brits are spending about $1 billion. I think there's 18 countries that they looked at in this research paper or industry outlook paper that they wrote that basically says, like, yeah, there's national and regional interest in doing AI well. There's ethics involved with it. There's money involved with it, and countries are taking it seriously. Some are actually committing funds to it. Others are just trying to do what this Trump executive order is. It's just like get the nation at least focused, get the nation and it and the bureaucracies within it focused on the initiative as a whole. And yeah, there's dual use, and it's a dual use thing coming. So, i.e., there will be militarization of the technology, despite what the feel-good AI ethicists want to say. The reason you get advancements in anything is because of its dual use. Nuclear power wasn't built simply because we wanted to power the world and kumbaya it. We needed it for weapons. And so it's why we went with, not thorium reactors. We went with uranium, right? And plutonium. Right.
Because you can make fuel and weapons at the same time.
And weapons. Two weapons at the same time. So to think that, like, we're not going to think that no one else is going to weaponize AI against us, and that we should somehow maybe lay out some ethical framework for how AI is to be used, which is silly, because in war that doesn't matter. That's just, I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with this. I just thought it was interesting. I think now that there's focus on it now, and they, people may be lamenting the fact that maybe, this executive order should have came with like some money attached to it and stuff. And I'm saying, like, we don't need to.
To me, it's just so weird that it's coming so late in the game and so just kind of off. I don't know. I don't see why Trump decided to suddenly address it. I don't know. It's just it's kind of like, the kid running after the bus saying, "Wait for me." I don't know. It's a very
industry is already on this, man. Industry is already
anyway.
on this. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think we've beaten that dead horse. But I mean, just keep an eye on that. There'll probably be more of a detailed breakdown of this initiative as they kind of break out these key areas of research and development and freeing resources and ethical standards, automation, international outreach, and they're going to come up with basically more a more detailed proposal based on this executive order, which basically says come up with a more detailed proposal, which is why the executive orders are kind of pointless and worthless. All right, so moving on to something that is near and dear to me and Gary's heart, and that is the breakout year. After a breakout year, looking ahead to the future of podcasting.
Yes.
So, yes. So, I think, we could kind of play off the article here that was written in TechCrunch again about, what is it? So it says like more than half of Americans have now listened to a podcast, and an estimated 32% listen monthly, up from 26% last year. I guess this is this year, and as opposed to 2018. This has kind of been the largest increase, yearly increase since the data started being tracked back in 2008, which wasn't the genesis of podcast. I've been listening to podcasts since 2004. Heck, 2002. So they're saying there are more than 700,000 podcasts and 29 million podcast episodes now. That's up 27% from 2018. There's huge listener bases that are being created. There's a podcast created every month or every day, it seems like. I mean, hell, what are we, month 3 or 4 here of
something
ours?
like that. Yep.
Something like that. And so like there's going to be a lot of money to go around in the future, right? Now that celebrities are starting to enter the fray. But there's listenership. The point is there's tons of listenership. Particularly here in North America, where we have a captive market of, about 400 million. And then, of course, you have Europe. This article actually kind of breaks out hey, like podcasts going international, and then, people doing actual native language versions of their said podcasts in other markets. And you got to think, though, that most of the industrialized world speaks some form of English.
Right.
So that means from an addressable market standpoint, there are literally 1 billion potential global listeners. And so now the money's coming in to see if there's a way to monetize that potential listener base that grows, on an annual basis, 30, 40, 50% a year. And so that, there's Spotify's plans to spend $500 million on acquisitions this year to, kind of bolster its listener base. A side note about Spotify. Spotify is killing it. They have, someone said they have 100 million active monthly users, and like 20% of them pay. I mean, they're so that's like what 10 isn't Spotify
It's
$10
$10
a month?
a month, yeah.
And like, yeah, and they're making anywhere from 200 million to 500, to maybe 500 million a month. And and if they get into the podcast game, and I was actually listening to a podcast called the Artificial Intelligence Podcast with a guy named Lex Friedman, and he had one of the founders of Spotify on there. They're even thinking about building, not just building platforms for distribution of podcasts, which is what Apple does, what Google does, but actually building in additional infrastructure and services, and probably software services that allow better production and monetization of podcasts.
Could be huge.
And better production and monetization of even music, like using AI algorithms to give feedback to artists that kind of that help them create better, sticky, more like engaging music. And Spotify is probably one of those companies that it's gonna mainly be music, and it's cracked that nut. But if they can get into other verticals, particularly podcasting, particularly if they help people monetize podcasts globally, because Spotify is a global company, and honestly, kind of like what YouTube has been trying to do, but has been kind of done in fits and starts, and that is offer tools to producers and creators on your platform, then they've built this vertical integration that maybe we start publishing maybe we do some deals with Spotify if it gives us access to Spotify listeners and their ecosystem and, tools to help us make better content.
Do you see them putting together marketing facets to it as well, or?
Yes. They've absolutely positively talked about that. It's why they are acquiring this Gemnet Studio. It's a tech platform anchor, and then they're acquiring content networks as well. And basically, you're gonna like they released an analytics dashboard for podcasters, and it's Google is adding like playable podcasts in search results. Pandora's still in the game. Apple's still the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to distribution. If they get smart about it, they'll start offering more. They'll be more upfront about maybe offering a full stack offering for podcasters such as ourselves, right? So the future is very, very bright for podcasting in that sense. And now that you have celebrities stepping into the game, that's going to raise the profile more. There's still a huge addressable market that has yet to be touched by podcasts. And then I was looking at some additional things like how listeners find out about new podcasts. Social media is how they do. Word of mouth, podcast apps, and software platforms. And so or from other podcasts. So that's half, so we're not even touching that yet.
Well, start plugging in some AI that does some content analysis to understand kind of what the podcast is or what the tone of the podcast is, or, you start going down that road and my God, I'm looking for something that's approaching this subject from this point of view. And who knows out there, Google's already done the analysis, said, oh, you might be interested in this one or this particular episode of this one kind of thing.
Yeah, no, this is true. And, I think this year we're expecting revenues in the podcast ad revenue to be $480 million in spend. And it's projected to be about $680 million, this year. So last year it was $480 in advertising spending. And now it'll be $680 going into this year. So that, over the past 4 years, ad revenue has scaled up at a 65% CAGR rate. So that's kind of an annual growth
maybe we can
metric.
make like $19 a month. That'll pay for our Disney Plus.
Yeah. I would prefer for it to pay for all my streaming services, which would mean we would need to make $60 a month.
Okay.
Each.
Well, we got a little work to do then.
You got a little work to do, right? You got to get some sponsors and stuff like that. But no, this is I was very fascinated by this article. The only thing that kind of raised my ire because I saw like someone posted something on Twitter about podcasting being suddenly being this awesome thing because Conan O'Brien's on it and stuff. It's like, dude, people have been grinding at the podcast game for well over a decade. Just because some famous people step into it now doesn't mean that it's going to be an asymptotic growth curve now. Because a lot of celebrities are just using this kind of like social media. They're using this as a much more self-promotion, a much more intimate form of self-promotion. which I've always found better. Like people think video, and people always say video. And I talked to a friend last night who was, him and his band were doing practicing and stuff, and just kind of talking to him offline. He's like, "Oh, you guys should do video for your podcast." Like, no. I take the much more, video will be a component in the future, I would imagine, right? I mean, if you're listening, Ryan, I'll be working on that. But I think I take I hate to invoke his name, but the guy is the best at this. I take the Rush Limbaugh approach to how audio as a medium is a lot warmer and a lot better means of painting a picture. Voice is a much better way of painting a picture, and it's very passive.
Yeah.
Like you can listen to a podcast while you're working. Like I was brewing the other day, and I was just listening to podcasts, right? And it's a very passive activity. It's very informative. It's much more long form, and you get better rates of pickup and stuff. You build a loyal fan base and stuff like that. So they're saying podcast advertising revenue between 2015 and 2021. Basically, they're projecting it being $1 billion.
Wow.
So, and to think if it were to go globally, right, it will be probably tens of billions of dollars, right, by 2021, 2025. More. I'm thinking more 2025, but that's just me pulling a number out of my butt. So this is good stuff, man. It's good stuff for us. If we keep grinding at this for the next couple of years, we'll be making might be making $120 an episode. or maybe just $120 a month.
I'll settle. I mean, I don't care.
But but I think we said like in the pre-show, right? If the podcast threw off a couple $100 a month for us, okay. Right, I mean, for not a lot of effort.
Here's my thing, like you said,
not,
it's a hobby, and it's one that we enjoy.
Yeah.
And if it helps fund our other hobby of brewing beer, then I'm down for that.
Hey, remind me to post show to kind of pitch an idea for an episode about homebrew tech.
Ooh, I love it.
Right?
I'm down for that.
Oh yeah, dude! Just a state of the homebrew hobby industry, like the technologies, We'll talk about it. We don't want to get out about it now.
That's what we call a teaser.
Yes, it's a teaser. That would be. Hey, if we had a paywall, that would be bonus content behind the paywall, where me and Gary wax eloquent about the advances in brewing technology. Particularly, I've been reading a lot of stuff about yeast. Wow, those things are amazing.
Oh yeah,
little cell factories that can do all kinds of stuff. I am a
big yeast fan. I actually have a whole book on. You know what? We're getting off topic here. We need to.
Yeah, no. See, it happened already. All right, so on that happy note, now we're gonna go into what I call my social justice portion of it, where now Google's SJW Clampdown begins. So let me set this up because it's the thing we lament about a lot. So I looked at it will be in the show notes. It's the Next Web article that basically says Google's new policy forbids employees from having raging debates over politics. So in order to truly understand the context of this article, we have to go back to an article written by Wired. When was it? Let me scroll up here. Written back on August 13th. And the name of the article is 3 Years of Misery Inside Google, the happiest company in tech. And this story goes over kind of the last 3 years of scandals that Google has had to deal with, tamp down, and a lot of its dirty laundry had been aired. And generally speaking, inside Google, there are private kind of Google Plus groups. For those of us not familiar, for those of us who remember Google Plus, pour a little out for it. It was a social media platform, kind of like Facebook, but very short. It was very short-lived. It grew very quickly, and then it kind of fell off because it wasn't as good as Facebook and some other issues. Google doesn't really do social that well, and truth be told, it does productivity better than it does social, but that's another story. So basically, within a lot of Google's these little inner kind of Google Plus groups, they have a lot of raging debates about cultural issues, issues within the company. There's also I guess there was one group for people who like coffee beans. There's one discussing diversity. There's one discussing polyamorists within Google. There's a lot of these kind of crazy social groups, right? And they've always been very aggressive in challenging the corporate CEOs and those in the C-suites and stuff like that, because people in the C-suites within Google have these all hands meetings. I don't know if they're weekly or bi-weekly or monthly and stuff like that. And so it prided itself on being a culture of openness and vigorous debate and all this other stuff. So what's been going on for the past couple of years is, for lack of a better word, another case of really how Trump derangement syndrome has broken a lot of stuff. I won't even say Trump derangement syndrome, right? I won't even make it that partisan. I would say 2016 broke a lot of things. Broke a lot of people, broke a lot of things. And this is kind of what started back, the backlash against Google. Not to mention the fact that it's been kind of somewhat proven that they're, in trying to implement algorithmic unfairness, they're being certainly unfair to certain groups. There's the James Damore debacle, which happened. There was the Andy Rubin debacle that happened. Andy Rubin, of course, was the co-founder of Google, of Android, that got acquired by Google, and apparently he was kind of a douchebag and like a womanizer and stuff like that, and I guess a consummate harasser of the female help. Mm-hmm. He left the company with a $90 million exit. Which honestly, truly, this is unpopular opinion. If that was put into place prior to him being found out as being a creep, the company was obligated to give him that money and then kick him out the door. But of course, because of this, the women at Google, there was some activist women at Google staged this walkout in 2018 to kind of protest this. Generally speaking, I think that's a good thing, right? Because it's like, it's kind of a douchey move, right? To like this guy who was a piece of garbage, just because he ran a division that has now moved the company toward a mobile first approach and other things like that. And that doesn't mean that like you allow the guy to get away with like douchebaggery and harassment, right? So that makes sense. So, but here's the deal. There's these group of rabble rousers within the company that have been giving people lots of headaches, and they're social justice and feminist types. And it's been making it very, very hard for Google to do its business, because every time it's either a walkout, it's them fomenting dissent when it comes to the project. Of course, the article, I guess, chronicles the beginnings and the ends of Project Maven, which was basically a DoD project for using it. It was a kind of a proof of concept. Can you use, Google's AI to identify targets for drones, and stuff like that? And then there was also this kind of SJW type who was by the name of Liz Fong Jones, who I think was transgender, who, a site reliability engineer, really beloved by certain people, but would always toe the far leftist line, and basically led a lot of the, witch hunts within Google against James Damore. Of course, the Andy Rubin thing, of course, working with, Project Dragonfly, which was basically a Google effort to try to sneak back into China with a very censored search product. And basically, and then of course they chronicle a right-wing engineer. They make him out to be the villain in the Wired story, because he was inside, basically pushing against a lot of the social justice agenda within Google. He had HR warnings about him and stuff. They tend to make the guy out. He's a Chrome engineer. He was a Chrome engineer. They tend to make the guy out to be pretty much the antagonist of the story instead of the protagonists of the story, which are these heroines within Google who were whatever. So basically, long story short, after this story, which basically chronicles all the stuff that went wrong in the last 3 years that made Google look really, really bad, that a lot of leaked internal documents, which we've been reading here on this show for the last couple of weeks, and it's basically raised the ire of the federal government and in within the state of California, a lot of like other things that have they have a labor relations board for doing stuff for wrongful termination. You have lawsuits coming up, and so now they're getting a lot of government ire. And now like the company's basically pushing back on this by basically saying like, look, these raging debates that we were having, while we still want it to be part of our culture, like it's gotten a little out of hand, right? To the point where like they don't do the all hands anymore because they've just become like shouting matches of, what Google should be doing better. And so they basically came out with a new memo, I guess, last week. That basically says like, look, the Mountain View company recently updated its community guidelines for employees to reflect the change in the company culture. The memo begins by emphasizing that employees at Google are there to do a job. Basically, that's basically what it says. So it's like, here's an excerpt from the memo. Working at Google comes with a tremendous responsibility. Billions of people rely on us every day for high quality, reliable information. It's critical that we honor that trust and uphold the integrity of our products and services. The following guidelines are official policy and apply when you are communicating in the workplace. It basically says, while sharing information and ideas with colleagues helps build community, disrupting the workday to have a raging debate over politics or the latest news story does not. Our primary responsibility is to do the work we've been hired to do, not spending working time on debates about non-work topics.
Amen.
That's
right.
So basically, because they've dealt with 3 years of this nonsense, which this Wired article greatly chronicles, they're basically saying, shut your faces, do your jobs.
Yep. And you know what?
What you do on your...
Any company that's smart, I mean, if I'm paying you to come in and accomplish something for me, I own your time. And part of that is you give up certain rights. I mean, I own you for that time. Sorry. If you don't like it, go. But I'm not going to sit here and...
maybe they'll get back to innovating and instead of virtue signaling.
Yeah, it would be nice.
And I think it would be nice, right? So like really a lot of the rabble-rousers that caused a lot of the turmoil over the last 3 years, so Andy Rubin's obviously gone. This Liz Fong-Jones site engineer who basically would rabble-rouse, and then when she would get harassed online, play victim, she resigned. This Kevin Kernicki, which was kind of the right-wing evil antagonist of the story, was he left the company, and he's filed basically a suit with the National Labor Relations Board. James Damore, we all know what happened to that poor guy. This Meredith Whittaker, who basically stirred up all this stuff about Maven, and then co-organized the women's walkout. And she also petitioned to remove the president of the Heritage Foundation from Google's AI Ethics Council. For those of you who don't remember what Google's AI Ethics Council was supposed to be, it was supposed to be in kind of this open council that would bring in different names, different people with different views, different backgrounds in to discuss AI ethics. One of the people who they wanted to bring on this AI ethics board is a prominent member of the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank. She's African American. She's very pro-choice, pro-life. I'm sorry. And so basically, this Meredith Whittaker chick just kind of stirred up foment within the ranks and to say, hey, why is this, for lack of a better word, evil person on the AI Ethics Council? That then basically caused pressure for the other people who are outside of Google who are on the AI Ethics Council to drop, and then Google subsequently scrapped the entire AI Ethics Council because of this rabble rousing. Meredith is gone. And then, of course, Claire Stapleton, who was a former YouTube marketing manager who helped also lead the November 2018 Women's Walkout, basically was slowly but surely forced out. And she probably also has a case with probably the National Labor Relations Board, because there was clear signs of retaliation on her part. Probably because A, she was a rabble rouser. 2, she got pregnant. 3, they definitely discriminated against her because of A, that, and 2, she was like a rabble rouser. And so it's ugly how these cadre of folks were gotten rid of, right? Because they all resigned, but they're all pushed out,
right?
Because Google, I think, as a corporate entity, is like, all right, enough of this nonsense. Like we got a job to do, and now there's increased government scrutiny on how they do their job.
Right.
And so because of all this bad press, they've lost their cachet in the Valley of being the cool place to work. Gone are the days of the interns where you have Owen Wilson and God, what's the guy's name? I always forget. Vince Vaughn making, you got to think, go back 10 years and how lauded it was to work at Google.
Mm-hmm.
How, because it did have this culture, which I admit is cool to have, but that allowed the freedom for them to come up with things like Google Maps and Google Wave, which is gone, which became basically a lot of the inputs into Google Docs, into AdSense, into all this stuff, right? All that freedom, right? But you're a plucky startup. Now you're an established brand and company,
right?
And you can't A, deal with social justice BS, B, hire introverted, slightly autistic, genius jerks. That's not going to fly anymore. You need steady engineers, product managers, and like DevOps to do the job of making sure that this cash cow, for which Alphabet derives almost 90% of its revenue from, Alphabet being the parent company that oversees Google, DeepMind, YouTube, whatever. You got to build a steady state company.
Right. The real world is calling. You're not in college anymore.
Yeah, right. The real world's calling. It means you need to get serious. And I think Google wants to clean house, and they want a corporate culture that's more in lockstep with what it wants to do. It wants to go into China. It will inevitably go into China, and that will require compromise. And you need a certain type of employee that is going to just be like, well, this is what I get paid to do.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get the best and the brightest engineers at that point. You'll get, personally, all engineers are pretty bright. But yeah, this is just... You
won't get the distractions or the risk.
Yeah, and that's what's happened. Obviously, of course, the Next Web author of this article was not very happy about Google's new moves, but you have to understand, Google is just another, as he says, stuffy big tech company worried about its own bottom line. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. He actually laments it in his...
Yeah.
It's how most tech companies operate. But you have to feel bad for the employees who've been there for a decade or more. Those who were hired back when Don't Be Evil was more important than Don't Upset Anyone. You guys have been upsetting people for a long time. And to say that you're not evil was always kind of self-serving. You're a big stuffy tech company now.
Yep.
You can hire free thinkers from time to time, but most likely from a Google perspective and even a YouTube perspective, you need product managers, engineers, DevOps. That is it. You don't need people, making decisions. You have Google Brain and DeepMind and Waymo and other divisions under Alphabet you can go off and do crazy stuff with.
Right.
Google is the cash cow. And I'm pretty sure after the fact, because the Wired article that I can allude back to makes all these, they were, the employees were turning on like Sergey Brin and Larry Page and all the C-suite executives, and it was making them uncomfortable. right? They thought that they could placate the mob because they were sympathetic to the fact that the election of Donald Trump and the travel ban and all these other things, that they were very sympathical with their employees who didn't like those policies. But then the inmates started leading the asylum, and it started interfering with their ability to do business. And so that's essentially what we've seen here. That's it.
Yep.
And it's good. I hope this means that Google gets back to doing some innovation, but most importantly, get back to its core mission, which is organizing the world's information and making it available to most people, which it still does, right? I mean, here's the deal. These were just very loud minority employees, right? A minority number of employees. I think the rank and file Googler, while they may lean politically left, really just wants to come in, get the job done, get their 6-figure check, and go home to their home where they live with 7 other engineers because a house costs $2 billion in Silicon Valley. So they're more worried about trying to eat, right? Than in trying to do a good job and trying to move up in their careers and stuff like that, or maybe even build their own, build their cachet so they can then branch out and do a tech startup. Than they are worried about like issues of, no offense, issues of harassment, issues of bad policy coming from DC, issues of social justice, hanging with the making a comment in the polyamorous group in Google Plus, in the corporate Google Plus. Most people, I find, just want to go in, pack their lunch, knock out some tasks, and go home. And I think what Google's doing now by maybe silencing is too strong a word, but they greatly.
I don't think it's silencing so much as just
incentivizing people to
It's just refocusing people on what we're here for. And there's a time and place for that kind of debate, but this is not it. And just reinforcing that value and kind of trying to remind people, hey, just simmer down. The conflict will still be there. I promise, so that when you go home, you can have these conversations online, and that's fine. I don't see anywhere where Google's saying we're going to monitor your offline activity and punish you at work because of it. They're not doing that. They're saying when you're here to do a job, do your job.
It's funny, yeah. They in light of that, you are absolutely 100% correct. It doesn't mean they're not monitoring offline conversations to retaliate against you at work. Still run by human beings. And if your boss sees you posting on a pro-MAGA site and you work in a very progressive department of said alphabet, to think that you're not going to get any retaliation would be silly. But then there's laws against that.
Right.
So, in corporate, and typically there's corporate HR policies against that stuff too. Rarely enforced, but it happens. It's good on Google. Bad on I feel sorry for the employees that kind of started out there where it's like, I used to be a lot better or stuff like. Everyone always says that. That's true. But at the end of the day, you guys are still working for one of the largest tech companies in the world, making pretty much way above industry average if you're a rank and file engineer. It's still the best company in the world to work for. You still get, relatively cheap or free lunches. You still get to hang out and do cool stuff and build cool stuff for people. So, focus on that stuff. No one outside of Google cares what you think about politics. That's just me. So, all right, well, that was the more headier subject. Before we get into the cryptocurrency minute, anything else caught your eye this week?
There was an interesting article that I meant to read, and I meant to bookmark on. I forget who put it out on the Apple iPhone and iPad vulnerabilities that go back a couple of years that involved daisy chaining of 2 or 3 different vulnerabilities that were widely known, and essentially giving anyone who was able to exploit them full control over your device. Didn't really get into it. The title of the article kind of stuck out to me, which was this new, or not, it wasn't even newfound. It was this kind of reported exploitation of vulnerabilities, which was, pretty easy to do. I mean, relatively easy. You or I probably couldn't, but, someone who's a hacker would. Basically gave every iPhone and iPad owner a reason to consider another platform for their devices. So, I don't know, maybe I'll look into that and try to get a little bit more. As a security guy, that kind of touched on me, but, just a reminder that, no matter how secure things are or are marketed to be, Apple being the one saying we're the only platform that can't be broken. Well, you're broken.
So I wonder if that has anything to do with this one story in The Guardian I was kind of going over, where Google says hackers have put monitoring implants in iPhones for years.
Google was the company. It was a Google, I don't know, division or group or whatever that actually reported the vulnerability and that they were able to exploit it. So I'll bet it was the same thing.
Oh, okay. So I'm kind of looking through it now. So I guess this one engineer by the name of, his last name's Beer.
Excellent. He's my friend.
Now he's my new buddy. So he's a member of Project Zero.
That's it.
A white hat hackers inside Google who work to find security vulnerabilities in popular tech, no matter who it's produced by.
That was it. It was Google Project Zero that reported the vulnerabilities.
How long ago did they report the vulnerability?
I browsed over it while I was on vacation in San Diego. It caught a couple sentences on it, but apparently the vulnerability has existed for at least a couple of years.
Right, and of course they were able to daisy chain these together, so, which, again, that's the whole nature of OPSEC and or taking multiple pieces of information and chaining together different vulnerabilities and then being able to exploit that and stuff. That's statecraft. That's hacker craft. Right. I mean, we just had Black Hat not too long ago too, and of course my coworker who came from there. I mean, scared the Jesus out of us about all that other stuff. So, and so that's actually pretty interesting. So that's getting tougher and tougher because there are much more vectors of attack for taking advantage and exploitation of people.
And the hackers are, I'm sorry, but the most creative and innovative people in the world, right? You don't get much more creative and innovative than they do.
Yeah, scary stuff. That's why I'm Android. All right, man. So there's no other things I got, man. I mean, I think we actually did kind of go over I guess we did go over that kind of hacker program, but it'd be nice to know the details of it. Also this week, I guess Sprint's 5G network launched in New York, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and DC.
Excellent.
All right, I think that's it.
All right.
So, any closing thoughts?
Nope. Again, going to, it's 11:23 a.m. It's almost beer time, so.
It's past beer time for me. I'm going to crack one here right after this broadcast. So with no further ado, I have been Nick Way. I've been Nick Way, aka Thaddeus Preston, or the other way around. I am at Nick Way on Twitter. That's NICKWAYE. And what's your handle there,
Liberty
Gary?
and Brews.
Boom. So follow us on Twitter, and also follow. Thank you for your servers and the whole Make Liberty Great Again podcast network to get the latest and the greatest from us as we rant and rave about, all things tech and culture and, whatever we're talking about. And stay tuned. Might be some bonus content coming your way for those of you who like beer.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you for logging in to Thank You for Your Servers. That is all. We're out.